Hey everyone, and welcome back to Exposed, Scandalous Files of the Elite. I am your host, Jim Chapman, and today we are back with this 13th episode in the Murdaugh series. And it's all come down to this, y'all. The trial is finally here, and today I'm bringing you the first day of testimony. Now, as we have done in the past, we're going to play some clips from the testimony, and when there's something poignant to discuss, as I did in Murdaugh's questioning by police, I'll comment, we'll discuss it, and then we'll get back to the testimony. But before we get into it, just quickly, I have a new Patreon global celeb to shout out. And when I say global celeb, I mean global celeb. So today I am welcoming Miss Nicole Jordan, who is from my absolute bucket list place to visit, New Zealand. A couple of facts about New Zealand. Now, because of its proximity to the coast and to the mountains, it's one of the few places in the world where you can lay out at the beach and snow ski all in one day. And it was also the first country to allow women the right to vote in the entire world way back in 1893. So thank you so much, Miss Nicole Jordan, for supporting, and welcome to the Global Celebs. Now, if you want to see what the fun is all about, check out the Patreon. We offer commercial-free early releases, bonus content, files, pictures, all kinds of things, and we would love to have you join us on the Patreon. Now, let's get into today's episode. And this first clip you're going to hear is from the very first witness called by the prosecution. And that was Sergeant Daniel Green of the Colleton County Sheriff's Office. And if you will remember, he was the first person on the scene at the sites of the murders of Maggie and Paul Murdaugh. I played you the entire body cam footage. So up first and leading the questioning is Prosecutor Creighton Waters. And here is that clip.
My full name is Daniel Green. My last name, Greene.
Sergeant Green, how you doing today?
I'm good.
All right, tell us where you work.
I work for the Colleton County Sheriff's Office.
Okay, and your rank is sergeant, obviously, is that correct?
That's correct.
Tell us just a little bit about yourself. Just give us just a little bit of your background that led you to your career in law enforcement, if you would, please.
Sure. I went to school here, grew up here, went to college at Charleston Southern University. I got a degree in social studies education, taught for a little while, and then got into law enforcement. Just kind of fell into it and liked it. And I've been here since 2014.
Okay. You started with the Sheriff's Department in 2014?
That's correct.
All right, and what was your first job that you did, or how does your career progress?
I started at the jail. I worked there for just over a year, and then I was moved to the road patrol. I was on road patrol for several years. Moved up the ranks to sergeant, where I was a road patrol supervisor, and now I'm a detective.
Okay. When did you become detective?
Earlier last year. It would have been June of last year.
Back in June of 2021, what was your job at that particular time with the Sheriff's Department?
In June of 2021, I was a road patrol sergeant supervisor.
All right, and explain how that works. What's your exact role as a sergeant and a road patrol supervisor?
So for the most part, I'm assigned a team consisting of 3 to 4 deputies, just depends, that include a corporal as well as several other deputies. My job primarily is to supervise them in their in a 12-hour shift. We answer calls for service. Sometimes I'll go with other deputies to calls that require more than one officer to be present. But the majority of my job is supervising what they do.
And during June of 2021, were you working day shift or night shift, or how did that work?
I was on night shift at that point.
And what are the hours of the night shift?
So we swap every 2 months. So 2 months you'll be on days, 2 months you'll be on nights. For those hours, it's 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. or 6 p.m. to 6 a.m.
Okay. And let me take you to the evening of June 7th, 2021. Were you working that particular evening?
I was.
And what shift were you working that day?
We're on night shift.
And again, so what hours would that be?
Working from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m.
So you went on duty at 6 p.m., is that
I did.
correct?
Yeah.
Okay. And you said you're the sergeant. What was do you have a squad that you're supervising that are out during that shift? Explain that to the jury, if you would, please.
So that shift consisted of myself being the sergeant. I had a corporal and 2 deputies working as well. And at that point, I had a lieutenant who was my immediate supervisor. He was working as well.
All right. And again, you tell me who those people were?
Sure. So my corporal was Corporal Janicki, and the 2 deputies working with me were Deputy William Pruitt and Deputy Chad McDowell.
All right. And the lieutenant was who?
Lieutenant Lonnie Nettles.
Did you, on the evening of June 7th, 2021, get a call for service at 4147 Moselle Road?
I did.
You remember approximately what time that was?
Later in the evening, several hours into my shift.
Okay. And did you ultimately respond to that location?
I did.
What was reported to you that led to the call for service from dispatch?
That there was a caller who stated he had found his wife and son shot.
And so tell me what happens then. You get that report. What do you do?
So I get that call for service. Obviously, we immediately respond. In situations like that, we would respond with lights and sirens to get there as quickly as possible.
You're driving fast to get there?
Yes.
Okay. Lights are on?
Lights were on, siren was on. I think it still took me close to 20 minutes to actually get to the scene from where I was. But
you have to ask dispatch to clarify the address?
I did. Once I got out there, it's a very dark area, very rural area on Moselle Road. There were not a whole lot of residences in the area, and I did need clarification once I got out there to confirm the address. Then I located the address on a mailbox across the street from a driveway.
So you saw the mailbox in the driveway you entered, is that correct?
That's correct.
The driveway that you entered that had this mailbox, where did it ultimately lead? What structures were there as you pulled up to the scene?
As I pulled down the long driveway, when I got to the end of it, there was a dog kennel area on the left as well as a shed area on the right.
Okay. And that was the driveway with the mailbox, correct?
That was.
Is this location where the scene was, is it in Colleton County?
It is.
Tell me just a little bit before we get into more specifics. What was the, you said it was dark. What was the weather like? What was the conditions of the scene or the weather in the scene like?
So quite normal for June around here. It's rather hot, humid. It had been raining a little bit off and on that evening. It was not raining at the time that I actually responded to the scene.
Now, you heard Waters ask about the weather. Why does that matter? Well, he's making a point that the weather is not what you would call perfect for finding evidence on a crime scene. It's been raining. Rain washes away evidence. Keep in mind, this case is all circumstantial, not a whole lot of what you would call direct evidence. So he's attempting to establish very early on to the jury as to why this is, and the weather certainly playing a part. We continue.
Were you the first law enforcement officer or first responder on the scene?
I was.
Were there other first responders following close behind?
The additional first responder that was directly behind me worked for Colleton County Fire Rescue. He pulled in almost the same time I did.
When you had arrived at the scene, before we talk about what you actually experienced at this scene, what is your main job at a scene like this? What are you there to do as a first responder, the first officer on the scene?
Yeah, so a major crime scene like that, my job is to get there, secure the scene. And what I mean by secure the scene is ensure that there are no individuals there that would potentially cause harm to additional first responders coming there or any witnesses or victims that are already on scene. Preserve any evidence that might be there, and then wait for investigators to arrive as I gather information from anybody else that is already on scene.
Okay. So you're going to gather basic information, but your job's not to investigate it in great detail.
That's correct.
Okay. As you arrived at this scene, again, what had been reported to you by dispatch?
That a male caller had called and said he found his wife and son shot.
And from that report to you, about how long did it take you to ultimately make it onto the scene?
It was roughly about 20 minutes.
Okay. When you arrived on scene, when you said one of the things that you do is secure the scene, were you at all concerned about any perpetrator still being there at that point in time?
When I arrived, not necessarily, just because he had already been there for quite a while. Whenever he called, it seemed the way the call came in that he discovered them like that and that there was nobody else there other than him and the wife and son.
So you're the first officer on scene, but you're not thinking the perpetrators are still there?
It's something you have to keep in the back of your mind, but not necessarily at the forefront.
Okay. All right. You didn't come in hot with guns drawn or anything like that?
No.
When you arrived at the scene and you walked and got out of your car, what did you see?
So as soon as I got out of my vehicle, I was walking down the rest of the driveway, which went between the dog kennel and the shed. As I could see Mr. Murdaugh down at the end of the driveway. As I approached toward him, I could see the male victim laying on the ground to my left, as well as the female victim on the ground to my right. The male victim was close to a small shed in the dog kennel on the left. There was a large deal of blood that had pooled around his body. Same thing for the female victim on the right. Also a large amount of blood around her body.
As you approached and at first saw the male victim and the female victim, what was your assessment? Was there any possible signs of life from your...
My initial assessment was that there was not. There appeared to be a large amount of blood around each of them, as well as brain matter.
Did you ultimately have a conversation with Mr. Murdoch when you were out there?
I did.
All right. And do you see him here in the courtroom today, the person that you talked to?
I do.
And can you point him out to the jury, please?
Yes, sir. He's right there, wearing a dark blue or black jacket.
Your Honor, can the record reflect that he's identified Mr. Murdoch?
It does.
When you ultimately approached Mr. Murdoch, what's the first thing that you did?
The first thing I did was ensure that he did not have any weapons on him. That's standard procedure for arriving on a scene like that. Any kind of weapons that are anywhere on the scene, I want to be aware of just so I can know whether they're there or not, and if they are there, who has access to them at any point. And that's for my safety as well as other responding officers and for anyone else that's on scene.
Did Mr. Murdoch give you any possible explanation for this when you approached him?
His immediate reaction was to start telling me about an incident that had happened with his son with a boating accident.
With the boating accident?
Yes, sir.
Had you asked him anything about that?
I did not.
You ultimately, were you wearing a body-worn camera that particular day?
I was.
You ultimately had a conversation with Mr. Murdoch for a fairly extended period of time. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Did you ever see any tears in your interactions with Mr. Murdoch?
He did not appear to be crying. He was upset, but I did not see any visible tears.
Did Mr. Murdoch tell you that he had any sort of firearm?
He did. He stated that he had left from that scene, went to the residence, grabbed a shotgun from that residence, and then brought it back because he felt like he needed to have it just in case something else were to happen.
He told you he had gone back to the residence after finding the victims to get that gun?
He did.
What, if anything, did you do once he told you that he had gotten a gun?
First, he pointed out where the gun was. It was leaning against the vehicle that he was driving at the time. I could see that it was a camouflage shotgun. I spoke with him for a few more minutes, and just based off of how nervous he was acting and anxious and upset, I decided it was in everyone's best interest to get that shotgun and secure it in my vehicle so that no one else had access to it.
Okay. So you put that shotgun in your vehicle, is that correct?
I did.
What did you ultimately do with that shotgun? Did you later turn it over to additional law enforcement?
Yes, after it was secured in my vehicle, once SLED arrived on scene to do their further investigation, it was then turned over to SLED.
Now, at this point, Waters produces the gun that Alex Murdaugh left the scene, retrieved from his house, the shotgun, and then brought back to the scene. And he has Sergeant Green identified. And he also plays the full body cam footage, which I already played that in a prior episode, so I'm not going to do it here. And then it's Dick Harpootlian's turn to cross-examine Sergeant Green.
Deputy Green, for my own edification, I'm curious. I've called over several weeks, left you voicemails for you to call me back and talk with. Have I not?
I haven't received any voicemails.
You don't check your voicemail?
Did you call my cell phone?
No, I called your office.
Okay.
I don't have your cell phone.
Okay. It's possible they set you to the wrong one. I don't know.
But you've spent an extensive amount of time talking to Mr. Waters about your testimony, have you not?
I've spoken with him a few times, yes.
How many times?
3 or 4, maybe at least.
And has he reviewed with you the points he was trying to make?
We've discussed the body camera footage extensively.
Right.
So here, Harpootlian is making a huge point of the fact that Green would not call him back, which is a huge point. The defense attorney has a right to speak to the detective, just as the prosecution does. And what he's trying to do is put the thought in the jury's mind, just plant a little seed that the sergeant was ducking him because he was trying to hide something, or he was trying to give the prosecution some sort of advantage. Pretty smart defense tactic there. We continue.
Let's proceed on. Let's see if I can clarify a couple matters. Let's talk about this shotgun. This is the shotgun that Mr. Murdoch was carrying or had leaning up against a car when you got there. Is that correct?
It was leaning up against that vehicle, yes.
And according to what you testified to just a moment ago, these are the shells, the chain of custody on the shotgun and the shell, they went together.
Whenever I released the shotgun to the SLED agent who took possession of it, I was unaware of any shells that may have been inside of it at the time that it was handed over. That was what was discovered inside the gun, is my understanding.
Okay. Where's that chain of evidence document? Okay, would you publish this to the jury, please?
You would like me to read it?
Yes, please.
The Camo Benelli Super Black Eagle 3 12-gauge shotgun, serial number U573210E17, 1 unfired shot shell 12-gauge Federal, 1 unfired shot shell Winchester 16-gauge.
Okay, so there's a 12-gauge shell and a 16-gauge shell.
Yes.
12-gauge shotgun.
Yes.
It's maybe way beyond your experience, but can you fire a 16-gauge shotgun shell from a 12-gauge shotgun?
I wouldn't recommend trying it.
You recommend what?
I would not recommend trying it. I don't know that it would actually work or not.
Could it result in damage to the person trying to fire the shotgun?
More than likely.
He's already said he doesn't have an answer to that. Objection's overruled.
So you would not recommend, you can actually harm yourself. It could blow up if you pull the trigger on a 16-gauge and a 12-gauge shotgun.
I've never tried it nor seen it tried, so I don't
And
know.
the reason you don't do that is because you could have personal harm from doing it, right?
It's possible.
So this shotgun, according to the chain of evidence you just read, had a 16-gauge and a 12-gauge in it.
Correct.
And was leaning up against a car.
It was. The shotgun was.
Now, I'm sort of interested as to
Sure.
I'm sort of interested as to why, well, let me just cut to the chase on this. There's discussions on this tape, or maybe others, that there was a theory that Paul had shot his mother and then shot himself. Is that correct? That's out on the scene.
Yes.
She had been shot multiple times, and he had been shot with a shotgun. At least one of the shots, we all believe was upward. That's why his brains were all over the ceiling.
That part, I don't know. I wasn't involved in that part of it.
At the scene.
I did not discuss anything being shot upward. I don't recall saying that.
Did you hear discussions to that of your fellow officers?
Of a shot being fired upward? That's what it looked like they were saying, yes.
Okay. And further, I think in front of you, one of the officers saying that brains are on the ceiling, there's blood all over the place, correct?
I don't recall them saying brain was upward. I don't recall.
Okay. And further, you, as you're discussing this with them, indicate, let me make sure I get this correct. You indicate there are multiple, or someone indicates to you there are multiple blackout rounds around Maggie's body in the vicinity, correct?
Not rounds, but shell casings.
Sorry, shell casings. Now, let me ask you this. When you got there, didn't the fire chief and the fire department arrive before you did?
No, sir. I was first on scene.
Okay. Did they arrive while you were there?
One of the fire rescue workers, I believe it was Barry McCoy.
And when you got there, we hear unidentified person, and in your notes you indicate it was the fire chief, I believe, that indicated to you, pointed out to you tire tracks, and you went over and looked at those tire tracks, and there were multiple tire tracks coming and going, correct?
I don't know that someone indicated them to me. I believe I just saw them.
Okay. And what did you do to preserve those?
The tire tracks, nothing.
And you certainly are not an expert in tire tracks.
I'm not.
So you couldn't tell whether it was multiple vehicles or one vehicle.
No.
And it may have been multiple vehicles.
May have been.
Did you take pictures of the tracks?
I did not take any pictures of the scene.
Instruct anyone to take pictures of the tracks?
No, sir, that's not my job.
When SLED arrived, did you tell them about the tracks?
No, sir, not my job.
Do you regret not doing that?
It's not part of my job description.
So what's your job to even tell them there were multiple tire tracks?
If it had come up, if I had been asked, yes.
And in addition to that, since they were not secured in any way, multiple vehicles, law enforcement vehicles and others, drove over those tracks.
That's possible. I wasn't over there the whole time to know what kind of vehicles were driving in the area.
Well, by the time SLED got there, did you strike that? You never took SLED over and pointed out tire tracks.
Not to my recollection, I did not.
Was there somebody there with your department that should have done that?
I have no idea what they do with their job descriptions as far as what they point out to additional investigators.
Did somebody from fire and rescue point out footprints?
I believe on my body camera there is a fire rescue individual pointing out some footprints.
Okay. Did you take pictures of those?
I did not.
Did you tell SLED about them?
I did not.
Now, a couple of things that bother me here with Sergeant Green's testimony, which I do feel Harpootlian did a great job of bringing up. First, those tire tracks. I didn't care for Sergeant Green's "it's not my job" and "not in my job description" comments. I just didn't care for that. I mean, if you see evidence on a scene and detectives show up, you definitely should point that out, in my opinion. But we continue.
Fire rescue person says to you, I believe he agreed with me, set of prints behind the trailer. You were told that.
Jack, he's publishing again this
I'm
transcript.
not publishing, I'm asking.
Your Honor,
Did you?
I object.
I haven't heard a question yet.
I'd like to make one. Were you told by fire and rescue there's a set of prints behind the trailer?
Yes.
Okay. And did he tell you that they attempted to not disturb those footprints in any way?
I don't recall exactly what was said.
Let me further ask you. You asked Mr. Murdaugh, we heard this on the tape, you talked about the tire tracks coming and going, and he told you those weren't his tire tracks, correct?
He did say that they were not.
Okay. And further, he indicated to you, Mr. Murdaugh did, that he felt this was related to the boat case. You indicated you knew about the boat case. You read about the boat case.
That's correct.
And in the boat case, Paul had been charged with 3 counts of felony DUI, killing a young girl and wounding 2 others, correct?
I don't know much details about that case. I really don't.
Okay. But Mr. Murdaugh indicated to you that the threats made against Paul,
He did.
and that he even got in a fight once about it.
I believe he said punched.
Punched, okay. And so on the scene, he believed that Paul's death was connected to someone angry about the boat case, correct?
Back to that, Your Honor, as to what he believed. Asking the witness what another person believed.
Objection's overruled.
Thank you. On the scene, Mr. Murdaugh indicated to you he thought the death of his son was related to his son's involvement in the death of a young lady and the injury of 2 others in the boat case, correct?
It appeared that that's what he was getting at, yes.
That's on the tape. Now, let's talk a little bit about the preservation of the crime scene. What did you do other than put yellow tape up to preserve the crime scene?
That is about the extent of my job, is to put up the tape and make sure people that don't need to cross it don't cross it.
And I noticed that there were officers walking around putting little pieces of tape near shell casings.
There was one officer doing that, yes.
And in the process of doing that, I didn't see any lights other than maybe a flashlight. Were there any, did y'all put up any sort of high intensity lights so people could make sure they weren't stepping on something in the dark?
At that point, there was no light, no additional lighting that had been put up. No.
But you and your officers were walking through that entire area, is that correct?
We were walking in the area, yes.
Now, a classic tactic here, just trying to prove contamination to the crime scene. Standard stuff to put a little doubt in the mind of the jury that something could be amiss. Next, Harpootlian shows some pictures of Paul's body and Maggie's body and continues to hammer down that contamination of the crime scene. Here's that clip.
So as you look at this, I want to make sure I understand. One of Paul's feet is still inside. This is the feed room behind him, correct?
Yes.
And this is his head, lots of blood, and this would be a part of his brain lying next to him, correct?
I don't know if that's part of his brain or not.
All right, so it's fair to say you didn't know whether that was part of his brain. When you first saw him, you didn't know whether his injuries were catastrophic and he was dead. Or did you?
It was very clear that it was catastrophic.
Okay. That's better. Now, when you came upon the scene, clearly this feed room was part of the crime scene, correct?
Yes.
Now, you're taught to keep the crime scene pristine, correct?
As pristine as possible, yes.
There was no reason for you to go in there, was there?
Me at the time, no.
Okay. Was there any reason for the police, before the Sweat crime folks showed up, was there any reason for you all to go in there?
There was no reason for me to go in there. I cannot speak if there was a reason for another officer to have gone in there.
Well, let me ask you this. Did y'all have any sort of crime scene expert with you that night, someone that processes crime scenes?
Investigators do process crime scenes.
Okay. Do you remember going in that meeting room?
I don't remember if I did specifically or
But
not.
you shouldn't have if you did, correct?
It's not to say that I shouldn't have. If there was something that needed to be done in there, then yes.
I guess what I'm getting at is, I think and you would agree with me, one of the cardinal rules of a crime scene is keep it pristine. Don't walk over things. Try to preserve tire tracks. Get pictures of them. Footprints. All those sorts of things. Was somebody with the officers with you? Were you in charge of the scene?
I was in charge of the deputies that were under my immediate supervision until someone higher than me had arrived on scene.
And were those deputies directed by you or anyone to do something to preserve the tire tracks? Pictures? Cordon them off? Cover them up?
I did not give anyone that instruction, no.
So you didn't do that. In terms of Paul, where Paul was laying, was anybody instructed, put a cordon around him? There's no reason to go into the feed room. There's no reason to do anything obtrusive until the SWED crime scene process. It's now on the way at this point, right?
I believe they were, yes.
And can you identify this for the jury, please?
That picture? Yeah. It's Maggie Murdaugh.
After she's been killed.
That's correct.
And by the way, when you saw her apparent that she was deceased, you believe, have you ever seen a dead body before?
I have seen multiple, yes.
Many, right?
Yes.
So you're sort of an expert in this area, who's dead, who's not, who ought to get EMS there to check them out or not, correct? You make that call often.
Yes.
Okay. But you could understand, obviously, Alex Murdaugh's concern that they might be alive, that maybe, I mean, you're not saying that he shouldn't be concerned that somebody check out both Maggie and Paul to make sure they were dead, right?
He was very concerned about that, yes.
Okay. Now, as to Maggie Murdaugh, we see these numbers. Did y'all do these numbers, or were they done after y'all were there?
I don't know when those numbers were done. They were not placed by myself.
Or your team?
I can't say that for sure, certain.
We see that in the video, that they're putting down yellow tape. They're not putting these down, correct?
That's correct.
Now, you also, according to the video we saw, a number of your officers are walking around marking where cartridges are, right?
They were.
Did they pick any of them up?
No, not to my knowledge.
Well, later on, we see them talking to you and others on the video where they're saying these rounds came from a blackout. They were blackout rounds. For blackout.
300 blackout, yes, sir.
Right. I mean, did they get down on their hands and knees and look, or I mean, did they?
You would have to ask them. I don't know what they did to know that they were 300 blackout rounds.
Well, who were those officers that were walking around her without a light on, perhaps stepping on evidence? Correct. Who were those officers?
Deputy McDowell and Deputy Pruitt were both in that area.
Were they doing that pursuant to your instruction?
They were not specifically instructed to do it. They just took the initiative to do it.
Did you in any way have your men or women put protective gear on their feet? I saw you put gloves on, but did they put anything to insulate themselves from contaminating the scene?
On their feet, no.
In many instances, departments around the country have people dressed in a gown to keep their DNA, their hair, from contaminating the scene. Do you do that?
We do not on road patrol in Gallatin County as standard practice, no.
You do not do that?
Not a standard practice, no.
Have you ever done that?
I have not.
Have you ever had something covering your feet when you're walking on a crime scene?
I couldn't tell you that for sure.
Now, if we later on find, and did you notice bloody footprints? Well, first of all, did you notice bloody footprints inside the feed room?
I don't remember seeing any.
Sorry?
I don't remember seeing any bloody footprints.
Okay. If there were bloody footprints in the feed room, could they have been created by you or your men?
They could have been created by anyone walking in that area, sure.
And you're walking in there, or your men are walking in there, correct?
Yeah, correct.
And you think that's standard operating procedure?
Well, you do your best not to contaminate anything.
And this is your best?
What you're looking at right now is standard procedure.
To walk in an area where there's blood, where there's brain matter, where there's, and I believe there was wadding laying on the floor?
I don't recall.
But you would agree with me that you have these procedures so that you don't contaminate the crime scene, so that you don't destroy evidence like those tire tracks or those footprints, or leave your DNA, or in some way alter the scene so that if, I mean, you would agree with me, so that, let me finish the question, so that if there is exculpatory or inculpatory evidence that would help you find the perpetrator and prosecute him, or evidence that would clear somebody, that was destroyed. Some of that was destroyed that night because your department, and maybe even SWED, didn't preserve that evidence. Isn't that correct?
I'm not sure if I fully understand your question.
The question is this: if you are exfoliating, your men are standing in the spot, and there was evidence there, or the tire tracks that weren't preserved, or the footprints that weren't preserved, that evidence could either incriminate somebody or exculpate somebody. Correct?
Could, yes.
That's why you don't do this, right?
That's why you don't contaminate the evidence, correct?
Well, I think in that exchange, Harpootlian definitely won. He nearly got Sergeant Green to admit that the crime scene was contaminated. He say what you want about the defense, but Harpootlian is a damn good defense attorney. We continue.
That's correct.
You put yellow tape around the kennel, right?
We put it around the whole area.
Did you put it so that folks couldn't drive in and out?
They were not to go past where my vehicle was parked. I believe that was the extent of the yellow tape.
But between your vehicle and the entrance, there was none of those tire tracks were preserved.
Entrance of
The property. That if somebody had driven into the property
You mean from the main road of Moselle?
from the main road,
All the vehicles were coming in on that driveway.
right? So if somebody had come in and left, who had committed the murders, whatever tire tracks that were left were obliterated by your men. Is that right?
It's possible.
Were you there when the coroner arrived?
Given my extent of the time there, I would assume so, but I don't remember
You don't remember
specifically.
seeing the coroner? The coroner.
I may have. I don't remember specifically.
Apparently, according to the body cam, you didn't talk to him.
Not on my body camera, but it could have been after the body camera was turned off. I don't know.
And why'd you turn it off?
Why was the body camera turned off?
Yeah.
Once my specific job of doing any primary investigation after my initial arrival is completed and I'm not going to be doing anything further to investigate, it's no longer needed.
Thank you. Answer any follow-up questions.
So with that, Harpootlian is done with this witness, and as is standard of any trial, the prosecutor gets the opportunity to respond to that, and the defense can respond to the prosecution's response. So Creighton Waters, he springs out of his chair in record time. He was probably salivating to get back up there, and he really does an amazing job of undoing the damage that Harpootlian caused. And Harpootlian responds to that. So here's both of those clips.
Thank you, Your Honor. May it please the court. You were asked a series of questions about contaminating evidence. Are you aware that any evidence was contaminated in this case?
I'm not.
Did you engage in everything you could to avoid contaminating evidence?
Yes.
Did you, in fact, instruct your deputies set up a crime scene and instruct them to avoid areas where evidence might be contaminated?
We did everything we possibly could to avoid contaminating.
Your officers all have basic training in trying to avoid contamination of evidence?
Yes.
Are you also, though, as first responders in a fluid situation, doing the best you can to assess what's going on?
Correct.
It's not your job to do the actual crime scene investigation work. Is that correct?
Not at all.
You were asked about whether or not you'd had any meetings with prosecutors. Is it common for law enforcement witnesses or any witnesses to meet with prosecutors prior to a trial?
Very common.
Okay. Did anybody ask you to do anything but express your accurate and honest opinions and observations about what you observed at this scene?
No.
You were asked about this particular shotgun right here. This 12-gauge shotgun. This is the shotgun that Alan Murdoch had when you arrived at the scene. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And you were asked about the shells right here. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Did you unload this weapon?
I did.
Was it unloaded by somebody else after you turned it over to them?
Yes.
You were asked a little bit about the 300 blackout casings or cases that were at the scene. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. And just real quick, explain to the jury what a casing or a case is, please.
So a casing would be what would be left after the projectile has been fired through a weapon.
After it had been fired, the shell that comes out of the gun and lands on the ground near the victim. Is that
That's
correct?
That's correct.
So it's the remnants of a fired round. Is that right?
That's correct.
There were multiple ones of those blackout surrounding Maggie. Is that correct?
That is correct.
You were asked a lot about the tire tracks, and you just happened to notice those over behind the defendant's vehicle. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And we had a still image put into evidence, exhibit number 5. This is it right here, which is the still image. Is that right?
Yes.
All right. And the still image doesn't reflect as good as what the video does. Is that right? You can see
The video shows it much better.
much better. All right. Were these like tracks in the dirt, or were these just impressions in the grass, in the dewy grass?
They appear to be impressions on the dewy grass.
They weren't like tracks in the dirt that you saw, correct?
No.
All right. I'm going to go back to the video. I'm playing it at approximately 25 minutes and 11 seconds.
Maybe. Okay. From earlier, but only 2 were mine.
Did you go out this way at all?
No.
Go let's try. Just go over to that corner of the building.
I'm almost to you. Let me see what we have first, whether or not we will handle that part or not.
I see quite a few tire tracks in here. Were any of these you going in and out?
No, I came in here and I left one time and I came back.
Okay.
But the rest of them, maybe
Okay.
from earlier, but
Okay.
only 2 were mine.
Did you go out this way?
So the images that we just saw, those were the dewy impressions in the grass that you were just talking about. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And the defendant said 2 of them were mine and the rest of them may have been from earlier. Is that correct?
Yes.
You were asked a little bit about the boat case. Did you have any detailed knowledge or understanding of the boat case when you arrived at the scene?
No.
You just knew very generally that there was some boat case. Is that right?
Yes, it had been in the news.
Did you even realize that this was that Paul Murdoch when you arrived on the scene?
Not until he had brought up the boat incident.
And who brought up the boat incident?
Mr. Murdaugh did.
And within a few minutes of you arriving, he's the one that brought up the boat incident. Is that
He did.
correct? And he offered that right out of the gate as a possible explanation for what happened here. Is that right?
Yes.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Anything further?
Your Honor. Did you find it unreasonable for him to say that his son, who'd been involved in this incident, who'd been threatened on numerous occasions, been punched, he told you he'd been punched, right?
He did.
Okay. That was a possible explanation, not implausible for somebody killing Paul. You didn't bite back on him, did you?
No.
And it was, in his mind, apparently the only reasonable explanation that occurred, right?
I don't know what was in his
Well, I
mind.
mean, that's what he told you. That's what he believed.
That was the statement that he made, yes.
Okay. And just one other follow-up question. You were asked if there was any evidence, the dewy tire tracks. This was at 10 o'clock at night. Was there dew on the ground already?
It was pretty humid out. There was a lot of...
It was humid.
Yeah.
Wasn't in like in the morning.
This was not morning time.
So, and are you telling me no one could have looked, no expert could have looked and said, you know, that's a Suburban, that's a pickup truck, no one could do that? Or
I'm not going to pretend to know what an expert in that kind of stuff can and can't do.
But you're not an expert. Did you believe those tire tracks would last until SLED got there?
Yes, it appeared that they probably would.
Did you point them out to SLED?
Did I do it?
Did you point them out to SLED?
I did not.
All right. So one witness, and it's already heating up. And next up is Officer Chad McDowell, who really gets under fire for lifting Paul's sheet and leaving a footprint. Creighton Waters was first up with questioning, and here's that.
The state calls Corporal McDowell.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you give to the court in this trial shall be the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. If you'll have a seat and adjust that microphone, make sure you speak into that microphone. State your name and spell your last name, please.
My name is Chad McDowell. The last name is spelled McDowell.
Corporal McDowell, how you doing today?
Good.
Tell the jury where you work, please.
I work for College and County Sheriff's Office. I'm assigned to the road patrol, the K-9 handler.
Okay, and can you just give us a quick background of who you are, where you grew up, and how you ended up in your career in law enforcement?
Sure. I grew up in College and County, went to College and County High School, went to college at Tri-County Technical College, where I studied criminal justice. Once I reached age, I came home, was hired by College and County Sheriff's Office, left for a couple of years to go work for Jasper County, and then came back to Colleton. I've been assigned to road patrol at Colleton.
All right, and what year did you first start working for Colleton County Sheriff's Department, or began your law enforcement career?
2016.
And what's your current, you said you're a corporal now, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And what is your current assignment? What are your duties?
I'm still assigned to road patrol. I'm a K-9 handler.
All right, and you say K-9. Explain to the jury what that is.
So I have a K-9 that is assigned to me. We respond to certain calls, or if we're requested by another deputy for narcotics searches for suspects, things of that matter.
All right. And K9 is a dog, correct?
That's correct.
All right. What's your dog's name?
Eva.
Eva? What kind of dog is Evo?
He's a Belgian Malinois.
Malinois?
Yep.
Is that kind of like a German Shepherd?
Kind of short-haired, pointy ears.
I got you. Short hair, pointy ears. All right. Is Evo typically with you when you're out on patrol?
Yes, sir.
Was Evo with you the night of June 7th, 2021?
Yes, sir.
Were you a corporal then at that time?
No, sir. I was a deputy.
All right. And who was on the squad that you were on?
Sergeant Daniel Green, Corporal Elise Janicki, myself, and Deputy Pruitt, Cody Pruitt.
All right. And so who was your immediate supervisor?
It would have been Corporal Janicki.
Okay. And then above that is?
Sergeant Green.
All right. And then above that?
Lieutenant Nettles.
All right. And then above that?
Captain Krause.
Okay. All right. What shift were you? Were you working the night of June 7th, 2021?
Yes, sir, I was.
And that was in Colleton County?
Yes, sir.
And what shift were you working that night?
Night shift.
Did you ultimately respond to a call for service at 4147 Moselle Road?
Yes, sir.
And you actually went there?
I did.
And did you come to the incident location at the kennels at that property at 4147 Moselle Road?
I did.
Is that in Colleton County?
It is.
Were you, when you arrived, what other first responders were on scene to your recollection?
Sergeant Green was there. There was one other fire rescue personnel vehicle in there. I believe the rest were staged, best I can remember. When I say staged, I mean at the head of the driveway. There may have been a couple of other apparatuses on scene.
And which, do you recall which driveway you entered? Did you enter the driveway near the kennels? Where you came upon the
Yes,
kennels?
sir. It was the same driveway everyone else entered.
So you were parked behind Sergeant Green's?
Yes, sir.
Okay. What did you do after that? After you got out of your vehicle, what did you do?
I approached the crime scene. I was trying to make my way to Sergeant Green to see what he needed me to do. I made my way through the crime scene as carefully as I could. I approached Sergeant Green, saw that he was interviewing the only person on scene.
Let me ask you this. You're obviously serving as a road patrol officer, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Do you? What is your job as a road patrol officer, as a first responder, when you come upon a scene like this? What is your particular role as you arrive at something like this?
We go on scene, we secure the scene, meaning make sure there's no active threat for other arriving first responders. We'll preserve the scene to the best of our ability and then turn the scene over to arriving detectives.
When you arrive at a scene like this, are you constantly not only paying attention for any threat or anything like that, but also making sure that you don't disturb or any sort of evidence that may be at the scene?
Yes, sir.
Is that part of your general training and standard operating procedure?
It is.
You also have to couple that, though, with the duties of a first responder, which is to get to that scene, to secure it, make sure there's no active threats, and get it under control. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So the duties of a first responder have both of those sort of balancing together. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
But are you constantly always looking around for evidence, not only to identify it, but also to assure that you don't disturb anything? Is that your general?
You're on a weedy.
Thank you, Your Honor. What is your general training as a road officer as it relates to coming upon a scene and looking for evidence?
Our number one duty would be safety. Number two, we're looking for evidence so as not to disturb it.
Thank you. Right there to the right, what is that to the right of the screen?
It'd be Miss Murdaugh's body.
Murdoch. Margaret Granstetter Murdoch.
Who are those individuals right there?
Sergeant Green and Mr. Murdaugh.
How you doing?
What did the defendant say to you right there?
He said, "How are you doing?"
Did you know him?
No, sir.
How you doing? That's what he said?
Yes, sir.
What's her birthday? I'm okay.
9/15/68.
And what's your son's first name? You said Paul?
Paul Terry Murdoch.
And what's his birthday?
4. What are they covering him up?
Tell them they don't have to do that. They don't need to.
He's asked that if we don't have to disturb anything, not to. We've got sledding on the way.
Maybe just gonna drive him up because the thing that he's here.
Yep.
That's
All right, what were you asking fire and rescue to do at that point?
Just to try to preserve it the best they could. If they didn't
Asking them, but what were you specifically asking them not to do?
cover the bodies if they didn't have to.
All right, and what was their response, though?
I couldn't make it out. I believe he said we're covering them for family responding. I couldn't make it out. He's asked that if we don't have to disturb anything, not to. We've got sledding on the way.
maybe just gonna drive him up because the thing that he's here.
Yep.
And that's it.
Do you recall now?
Again, it sounds like he says we're going to cover him up because of the family being here.
Okay. Does the family being here?
That's what it sounds like.
All right.
Right through here, go around this way here. So this thing strong enough.
Yes, I agree.
I told everybody else to cancel, so won't really else come down here.
Hey, Cody, I need a piece of that tape whenever you get done.
What did you just ask Cody for?
A piece of tape, piece of crime scene tape.
All right, and who was Cody?
Deputy Pruitt. He is the one that you see there with the yellow crime scene tape.
And why did you ask Deputy Pruitt for some crime scene tape?
I had observed a shell casing on the ground. I wanted to mark it so that it didn't become disturbed.
General duties as an officer, you observed something and you asked for some tape to mark it. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And that's what you were previously describing your role is that correct?
Yes, sir. Yeah. If y'all don't mind, just mark them. Do what? Okay. I got a casing right here, so watch your step.
That's what I'm thinking of.
That casing that you saw, did you recognize what kind of ammunition it was?
Yes, sir.
What kind of ammunition was it?
300 blackout casing.
And how could you tell it was a 300 blackout casing?
Just my own personal experience. I own a 300 blackout, and I recognized it.
You recognized the case from your own experience?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Now, if you will remember with the previous witness, Harpootlian asked him how they knew that ammo was 300 blackout ammo without disturbing the shell casing. And the response from Green was he didn't know. Harpootlian, of course, was leading the jury to think that someone must have picked it up and disturbed evidence. Great job here by Creighton Waters to shut that down completely and get an answer to that question. We continue on.
Did you observe any dogs in the kennels?
I did.
Do you remember how many or where they were?
I do not remember.
More than one dog, though?
I don't remember. They said they had several casings by her body, but this one will be a little bit harder to find later, so I want to mark it real fast.
When you marked that casing, were you careful not to disturb its location where you found it?
Yes, sir. I placed the tape beside it and then placed a rock on top so that it wouldn't blow away. Why are there so many shell casings and only one?
We're flying up in here. Try to block the road off up here, but they bring the white one for what? poison around.
Sorry to do that to everyone. Well, what was that loud noise?
It's just my windshield wipers.
And why was it making that noise?
They had removed all the moisture, I guess. I don't see anybody.
Yeah, come through for a call.
Can I see a couple more pieces of film somewhere?
Back where? Over there?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out why there's 3 in our blackout. Trying to figure out why there's 7 more shell casings, but only 1 gunshot went to the back of each head.
Exactly.
Not my job to figure that out. I'm just curious. I only saw 1 more casing, but just in case I see more. Daniel put his car in there. So, no. This is, I'll tell you about this in a minute.
I don't think I've ever been out here, so.
There's one there. There's blood over here. You're looking at shell cases? 3 in our blackout. Sheriff?
Those cases that you were marking right there, did you at all disturb the location where you saw them?
No, sir.
Is it your job to be doing a crime scene collection for this case, or are you just doing that to assist those who will do that will arrive at a later time?
No, sir. I don't collect anything. I'm just marking it so that they're not disturbed.
Who's that to the right of the screen right there?
That would be me.
All right. And what are you about to do?
Step inside and assist CID with lifting that sheet.
All right. And were you asked to do that?
Yes, sir.
And who asked you to do that?
Captain Chapman.
All right. And where's Captain Chapman in this image?
In the middle
And is he a senior officer to you?
at that time.
Okay. And I noticed before you moved, what did you do?
Turned my light on
And why did you turn on your light?
so that I could plainly see what was underneath me where I was going.
Did you disturb any evidence or anything as you started to go into the feed room?
No, sir.
Were you careful to avoid doing that?
Yes, sir.
Did you kick any shell casings or waddings or anything like that when you went into the feed room?
No, sir.
Did you step on any bloody footprints when you went into the feed room?
No, sir.
If you had seen something like that before you stepped in there, what would you have done?
I would have stopped and notified the detective.
Well, the dad's over there. Actually, hold on. Fire rescue might have some more sheets they can steal.
That's why it shouldn't be getting back to the wall.
Do you recall what, if anything, was laying on Paul's rear end?
His cell phone, or a cell phone.
Is that it in this image right here?
Yes, sir.
Unless it's too short, it's for another blackout. Is that what that is?
I haven't asked the dad about the phone, but dad did say he came over and checked the pulses. Beyond that, I don't know what else he can do. He did have a shotgun with him. I have secured that. I beat him.
Yeah, but he set up with something. All the single been there. So, you know, it's on.
Did you kind of jump out of the feed room just then?
Yes, sir.
Did you turn on your light before you did so?
I believe so.
Watch it again. Did you jump out when you left the feed room?
Yes, sir.
And why'd you jump out like that?
Try not to disturb the body. It was easier to leap out than to try to step.
Did you enter the feed room at any point after that, to your recollection?
Not to my recollection.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as defense exhibit number 1 and see if you recognize this particular image.
Yes, sir.
Can I switch inputs, please? Does that appear to, is that how you found Paul when you arrived at the scene?
Yes, sir.
And were his hands underneath him in that fashion when you arrived at the scene?
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, I have State's Exhibit 7, I believe without objection. Without evidence.
Objection.
I'll show you what's been marked as Exhibit 7 and see if you recognize that image.
Yes, sir.
And what is that?
It's a still image of video of my body-worn camera.
Is that a still image of when the defendant said, "How you doing?" when he walked up?
Yes, sir.
Just masterful the way Waters ended that, bringing up the "how you doing" comment. Who says that? Those 3 words had bothered me since the first time I saw that body cam footage. That was so far out of place. At that point is when I said, oh, this guy did this shit. Well, let's see what Harpootlian can do to unravel what was, in my opinion, some great direct by Waters. Here's that clip.
When you got to the scene, who was your supervisor?
Sergeant Green.
Sergeant Green. And I believe Sergeant Green was instructing y'all to put some yellow tape up. You did some of that?
No, sir.
You didn't do any of that?
Deputy Pruitt, yes, but I didn't know.
What was Sergeant Green, what was his instructions to you? What were you there to do? Number one, let me withdraw that question. Were you there to apprehend somebody?
Not at the time, no, sir. I was just there to assist where needed.
Assist doing what?
Whatever was needed of me.
Were you all attempting to determine what happened?
We there as initial responders were there to secure the scene.
Okay, secure the scene. And secure the scene for further processing by SLED?
By our investigators, I learned later on that SLED was responding as well.
So let me, by way of example, you went down to where Paul's body was. It was covered with a sheet. We see that on the video. Correct?
Not when I initially responded, but yes, sir.
No, but the video we just saw.
Yes, sir.
And why were y'all, what was there a purpose in going down there and pulling the sheet back, looking around it?
I believe they were looking for another weapon.
What kind of weapon?
I believe they were looking for a 300 blackout.
But, we saw in the picture, that you look at Paul's body, there's no 300 blackout laying next to him. Correct?
No, sir.
I'm correct.
Yes, you are correct. No, there was no 300 blackout laying beside him.
Okay, so you say you're down there looking for another weapon. Where were you looking for another weapon?
I wasn't, sir. I was assisting lifting the sheet for detectives. And
you concede you stepped into the feed room.
Yes, sir.
And based on the way Paul was laying, and of course you did have a flashlight, you were looking, trying not to step on anything. Did you have anything to insulate your feet? And in some jurisdictions they have little baggy things to put over their feet to make sure they don't contaminate the scene. Did you have those on?
No, sir.
And did you, when you stepped in, you got a flashlight, what you were looking at with the visible eye, you're determining you weren't disturbing the scene, correct?
That's correct.
You made an effort not to.
Yes, sir.
You don't know whether you did or you didn't.
To my knowledge, I did not.
But you can't say that you did. To your knowledge.
I Can you repeat that?
To your knowledge, you didn't.
To my knowledge, I did not disturb anything.
Okay. But you would concede there's microscopic evidence sometimes of crime scenes, correct?
Yes, sir, that's possible.
And you didn't have a microscope.
No, sir.
But like SWED's crime team would look very closely, would they not? They would not. I mean, as far as I could tell, you were looking basically for 3 or 4 feet away from the floor, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So what you can see with the naked eye at night with a flashlight from 3 or 4 feet is what you base your opinion you didn't disturb anything.
That's correct.
Now, and you don't know why they were looking for another weapon, but you don't know what other weapon, you don't know where that weapon might have been. And again, multiple deputies had seen Paul's body before he was covered with a sheet, right?
Myself, Sergeant Green did.
Okay. But y'all, in your presence, any of the other officers with you there that night, did any of them discuss this as a possible murder-suicide?
It's possible. It's not to my recollection.
Now, when you were going out and we saw you mark a shell casing, was that in the grass or on the dirt road?
I believe the first one was in gravel.
In the gravel, I'm sorry.
Yes, sir.
Okay, but you found others, right?
Yes, sir.
And to do that, you had to walk around in the grass?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And again, you've got a flashlight, you're looking, and you don't know what was in the grass that you may have disturbed around those shell casings.
No, sir.
You don't know.
No, sir.
You may have disturbed something.
It's possible.
And I guess what I'm trying to ask is, why then were you trying to look for shell casings? Why couldn't you wait till the next morning? Why was this urgency? I mean, was somebody getting away, or I don't quite understand why.
I can't answer that. I don't know. I didn't know if somebody was getting away or not.
Did somebody instruct you to go find shell casings?
No, sir.
You just did it on your own initiative?
Yes, sir.
And you concede that you may have disturbed or destroyed evidence in that process?
Microscopic or something I didn't see.
Well, microscopic, something down in the grass. I mean, you're walking on grass, right? Not a smooth surface like in the shed, in the feed room, but it's grass at night, correct?
Yes, sir.
And I guess what I'm trying to wonder is what y'all were doing. Were you trying to solve a crime? Were you trying to just index everything was there? And when did you find out SLED was coming?
So we're trying to mark everything there. As you can tell, there were multiple units going back and forth, fire rescue as well as sheriff's office. We try to mark it so that it brings awareness to them and it doesn't become disturbed.
I'm sorry, I can't understand. I can't hear you.
There were multiple units on scene,
Right.
sheriff's office as well as fire rescue.
Right.
The reason that I saw urgency to mark those shell casings is so that it brings awareness to those of us that were walking around and they don't become disturbed.
Well, that brings up the question: should you have been walking around? What if you got 2 dead people? Whoever the perpetrator was, at that point, y'all hadn't identified, had you?
No, sir.
Okay, so the perpetrator may be in the woods across the street, as far as you know at that point, right?
Could have been anywhere.
Right. So you're not trying to solve a crime, you're processing a scene.
I'm not processing anything.
You don't know what you're doing.
I just told you what I was doing, sir.
You're marking pieces of evidence.
Yes, sir.
And the urgency to do that was so that no one else would walk over them
Yes, sir.
while you're walking around them.
Around. Yes, sir.
Well, you don't know whether you actually stepped on one or not, do you?
I was very careful not to.
Okay. Now, let me also ask you this. The pattern of the first shell casing was how far away from the feed room?
I can't
That
say.
you found?
The first shell casing I found?
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
10 feet, 20 feet, more than me, further than...
Probably about the same distance from me to you.
Okay. From the feed room door?
Yes, sir.
Now, I understand, and you got a blackout, right?
Yes, sir.
And when you fire that, does it eject to the right or the left?
To the right. Mine does.
Okay. So if the feed room is where I am, that shell casing ejected to the right and forward, right and back? What do you know?
Are you asking where the shell casing was in relation to the door? It would have been forward and right of the door.
Forward and right of the door. And there was the pattern of casings leading, do they all lead to her body?
I can't remember.
Did you sketch where you found her?
No, sir, I did not do a crime scene sketch.
Have you ever done a crime scene sketch?
No, sir.
Tell me your training in crime scene processing.
It's very basic, limited what you would get at the Criminal Justice Academy.
Very basic.
Yes, sir.
So you're not a crime scene processor. Again, and I'm not asking this question repetitively, I'm just trying to puzzle it out. What, you don't know what your role was there?
I was a first responder.
Well, they were dead, Paul and Maggie, right? You couldn't render them any aid.
Your Honor, I would object. No question in that statement.
Is there a question?
Could you have rendered them aid? Were they in a physical condition where your assistance would have helped?
No, sir.
They were dead. Correct?
Are you asking? Yes, sir.
Yes. Okay, let me show you a couple of these clips and ask you about them. Okay, this is you walking, and these are the dog pens over here to the left, correct?
Yes, sir.
And on right in front of that, one of the dog pens is a hose that is neatly coiled around a hose, something holding the hose, right?
That's what it looks like.
Okay, go ahead. How about go to 11, 12.
How you doing? What's up?
Okay, now, this, Mr. Waters asked you about this just a moment ago when he said, how you doing when somebody walked up. You would concede to me that but for that one quip, he appears to be distraught over the death of his wife and son.
He appeared visibly upset.
Yes, okay, other than this, how you doing sort of thing, right?
Correct.
Okay, also, we see him in a t-shirt and a pair of shorts, correct?
Yes, sir.
I've looked at your report, I looked at everybody that encountered him that night. No report indicates any blood visible on him. You would agree with that?
I didn't observe any.
What?
I did not observe any.
It's a white shirt.
Yes, sir.
Okay. If you noted blood on him, you would have put that in your notes or reported that to somebody, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
$300 blackout. 300 blood.
Stop 1 second. That's you apparently determining the shell casing you found is a 300 blackout, correct?
The one that I marked, yes, sir.
The one that was in the gravel.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So, my opinion, Waters won that by a mile, but Waters was not done yet with this redirect.
Are you a first responder?
Yes, sir.
Your first job is safety, correct?
Yes, sir.
Second job is to protect the scene, is that correct?
Objection leading.
Thank you. Tell me what your jobs as a first responder are again.
Yes, sir. We secure the scene, make sure there's no current threat for additional first responders. We then secure the scene, make sure that nobody comes in that's not supposed to, so that we preserve any evidence that's there.
It's part of your training to avoid disturbing the scene as best you can.
Yes, sir.
Still paying attention to your primary role.
Yes, sir.
It's part of your training and your experience and what you try to do is if you do see
Objection,
evidence.
Your Honor. Leading.
I'll rephrase you. If you are on scene and you do see evidence while you were there, what is your standard operating procedure in that event?
I would mark it
And why do you do that?
just to bring awareness to it so that it's not disturbed.
It's your job to be a crime scene investigator.
No, sir.
You're just marking that? I'll rephrase. You were asked earlier about apprehending any suspects. Was Mr. Murdoch ever in custody?
No, sir, not to my recollection.
To your observation, was he allowed to move freely?
Yes, sir.
Was he allowed to interact with people who came to talk to him?
Yes, sir.
Was he ever placed in the back of a police car?
Not that I'm aware of.
Never put in handcuffs?
No, sir.
Was he being treated as a suspect when you were there?
Not that I'm aware of.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Thank you. You may step down.
So there you have it. 2 up, 2 down in the first day of direct testimony. Now, they had several other people, including the 911 dispatcher and the fire chief, as well as Captain Chapman's testimony still to go in this first day. So on the next episode, I will cover that. But what struck out to me so far, more than anything else, is the scene sure could have been secured better. I think these police officers did a great job. These are road cops. They're not detectives. And I think they did a pretty good job of securing that scene, but there was some sloppy stuff there that for sure a trial of this magnitude, you don't want that kind of sloppiness on the scene. The main thing that was highlighted in this episode for me was that comment, "How you doing?" I think that made quite an impression on the jury, and I honestly think that won the day for the prosecution. Shout out to Creighton Waters for focusing on that so much, and we are just getting into it, folks. I want to thank all of you so much for listening. Please rate the podcast wherever you listen. It makes all the difference in the world. Just one word and hopefully 5 stars. It really helps to push this podcast out to people that are not familiar with it. Thank you so much to the Patreon celebs. I couldn't do this without you. And until next time, for Exposed, Scandalous Files of the Elite, I'm your host, Jim Chapman. Much love.